everyone, welcome to the sixth and the last video of the series. So in the previous videos we actually created our API and developed our different endpoints and controllers, and in this video we're just going to write some documentation for the API using Swagger. And before we begin, I just went on and installed the necessary packages. So just go on and install YAML.js and Swagger UI Express. So uh, just a little bit of explanation. So there's basically two ways to write Swagger inside this JavaScript environment, Node.js. And we could use JSON objects, or we could write it in a YAML file. So both ways are good, but I personally prefer to do it in a YAML file, so I have all of my documentation in a single place. So without any further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. So first things first, we're going to need to require some packages that we installed. So I'm going to say const uh, swagger UI, and I'm going to require this. So let's say Swagger UI Express. All right, and after that we're going to require YAML. Let's say require YAML.js, and then the last variable that we're going to define is Swagger spec, and we're going to use YAML to load our YAML file. So it's going to ask us for a string, and we're going to give it the current directory's path, and inside lib and swagger.yaml. All right, and the next thing we should do is actually create an endpoint for the documentation. So let's say app.use, and we're going to say API version 1 and docs for documentation, and we're going to say swagger UI dot serve. We're going to call that, and after that one more thing, swagger UI dot setup, and we're gonna give it the spec. So swagger spec. All right, so we're all set up and ready to start documenting our API. So inside the roots folder, I'm just gonna create a new folder and call it lib, and inside that I'm gonna say swagger dot YAML. All right, so we're all ready. Right, let me just clear the terminal. So the first thing we need to specify inside this Swagger YAML file is the version of OpenAPI. So I'm going to say OpenAPI. I'm going to use version 3.1.0. After that, we're going to provide some information, overall information about our application. So let's just say info, and under that I'm going to say title. Title, it's going to be my API, and description is going to be docs for YouTube tutorial API. All right, and after that we could provide a version for this API. So let's say version, and we're using semantic versioning, so let's say 1.0.0, and now what we're going to do is provide servers. So we're just saying to whoever that reading this documentation on what servers our app is running. So let's say servers, and here I'm gonna say let's just say URL, which is going to be HTTP localhost, and running on port 6500. So, and let's just give some description. All right, so the main server, and URL, and let me just go ahead and copy this thing, and we're gonna change it to something like, I don't know, 3000, and description is going to be backup server. All right, so let's just go ahead and see the documentation that Swagger has set up for us so far. So what I'm going to do is start the server, npm start, and we're going to localhost 6500, and we're gonna search for API version 1 docs. Right, as you can see, this is our Swagger documentation. This is title, description, and our servers. And for some reason, our API version is not showing up. So let's see what the problem is. And this should be right here. All right, so I'm gonna start the server again, and for some reason, Nodemon or Swagger, I don't know which one it is, uh, it doesn't automatically restart the server when we're using Swagger, and so Swagger doesn't really show us the new changes, so I have to restart it manually every time. All right, so the version is here, so let's just go ahead and start documenting our different endpoints. I'm gonna kill this again, and all right, so here what I'm gonna say is uh, paths, and so we're gonna have this path, which is gonna be API version 1 users, and we're going to have a get request at this path, and also a post request, so we'll develop them later on. And then the next path that we're going to use is API version 1 users, and then I'm gonna open the curly braces, and this is how we define URL params inside Swagger and YAML file. And inside here what we're gonna get is a get request when we want to get a single user from database, and then there's gonna be the put request, and then which is updating the user, and then there's delete. So we have defined all of our CRUD operations, and before we go any further, what I like to usually do is just go way down here, and this is a really good practice to do when you're creating your Swagger documentation. I'm gonna say components, and I'm just gonna explain this in a bit. So what basically components is, we're going to create schemas and boilerplate code for everything that we could use. So for example, this Prisma schema which we created for a user, this could be a schema inside components, or maybe the ID parameter, or I don't know, all of our errors that have a really specific structure. So we could just write them down here, and we could then reference them inside our actual documentation. I'm gonna just show you what I mean in a bit. So what we're gonna say is components, and we're gonna have a bunch of sections. So let's say schema, not a bunch of, maybe one or two. So schemas, this is gonna be for our schemas, and then we're gonna say errors. All right, so this is our next section. So under the schemas, we're gonna have a couple of schemas. So we're gonna have a user schema, and then we're gonna have a error schema, and also an ID. All right, so under the errors we could say, so I'm just gonna just list all of our possible errors inside our application. So if I just go here, you could see we have I don't know, a 404 error, or a bad request, or conflict, or internal server error. So all of our possible errors are going to be here, and we're just going to reference them, and it's a really nice way to just write this documentation. So I'm gonna go ahead and write them. So first one is internal server error. The second one is going to be bad request and not found, and then conflict. So I think that's all of our possible errors. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's just go ahead and develop these different sections. So side users, what we're going to do is just define how our user object is structured and defined. So let's say it's a type of object and it's going to have some properties. So, and the properties are going to be user ID, username, password, and age. All right, so under each and every one of these, I'm going to specify the corresponding type. So this should be an integer, and after that, username is going to be of type of string, password is also string, and age is of type integer. Alright, so this is the overall structure of our user schema. After that, we could go ahead and develop the error schema. So our errors are, let me just find this error handler. This is how our error object is structured. We have a name, status code, description, and a boolean, which is operational. So let's just go ahead and do it. So type is again object, and we have different properties. Alright, so these are all of our properties. Name, which is of type string. Then we're gonna say status code, which is of type integer. And lastly is going to be is operational. Operational, make sure I spell it correctly. Right, it's gonna be boolean. Alright, so this is how our error object is structured. There is this type and our different properties. And let's just go ahead, and the next one is our ID. So the ID is usually the ID parameter that we pass in into our request, and when we specify which user we want to get from database. So let's just say that this, so I'm gonna say name of this is going to be ID, and it's going to be in path. So this in keyword refers to what type of parameter it is. So this is or whether it is a query parameter or something else. So this is a path parameter. So the next thing is we're gonna say this is required. This should be true, and also let's say type is integer, and let's give some description. So I'm gonna say the unique ID, we pass the unique ID of the user, the unique ID of the wanted user, and if I'm not mistaken, inside this description we could actually use markdown. So let me just test that out. Alright, so after that we could just provide some example, and this should be 1. Alright, so I think we're done with the ID, and let's just go ahead and get started with errors. Alright, so internal server error, the type is going to be no, actually what we should do is say content. I'm sorry, this should be description. Description is internal server error, and then we provide the content with application JSON. Alright, and here what we want to do, so this is where these components come in handy. So instead of writing this schema manually, what I'm gonna do is just reference it from this error that we define here. So what I'm gonna say is schema, and This is how we reference stuff inside Swagger. So we use this dollar sign, and this is an operator here, and then we open this double quotes, and we use this sign here, and so what we're basically telling Swagger is that we're referencing the schema somewhere else. So inside the components, which is this section here, Swagger should look for a schema section and then error. All right, so let me make sure I got everything correctly. All right, this seems to be fine, and let's just go ahead and provide an example. So the example is let's just write them down. All right, so the name is internal server error. That's the name of the error, and then there is a status code, which is 500. Description is let's say something went wrong, and after that is operational. And it's false. All right, so for the rest of them, I'm just going to copy what we have just wrote here. So let's say, all right, so make sure I go here so I get the indentation right, and this should be bad request. Content is application JSON. The schema is the same. An example, right? Let's just write this example. Status code should be 400, and description is, let's say, all fields are required, something like that, and it's an operational error. All right, what I'm gonna do is again paste this here and also here. So it should be 404. I'm gonna say user not found. It's an operational error. Let's just get everything correct. So the conflict is 409, and this should be conflict, and I'm gonna say credentials were retaken. Alright, so I think I got everything correct. Alright, so we're done with this component section. We could actually now go on develop our documentation for actual endpoints. Alright, so the first one is get, and we're gonna get a list of all of the users. So I'm gonna start with specifying an operation ID. So it's gonna be get all, and after that let's just say summary gonna be gets all of users, and description. So description, we could give a more detailed summary of what we're doing. So retrieves, if I spelled that correctly, retrieves a list containing retrieves a list of all users from database in, so let's just say use markdown and JSON format. Alright, and after description we could provide tags, and I'm going to show you what this tags is for later on. Users. Alright, so now what we should do is provide our different responses. So let's just go to controllers. And as you can see inside this get, oh, the only response that we could give is a 200, which is a successful response, or if something happens, and that would be an 500 error. So that's internal server error. So let's go ahead and write them down. So I'm going to say responses. All right, and this is 200. Description is okay, and content is application JSON, and the schema is alright. So this is exactly why we wrote down this component section. I'm just going to reference this. So I'm going to say $ref and components, schemas. Make sure I write that correctly, and this is going to be error. No, this should be uppercase, capitalized. Alright, make sure I got that correctly inside schemas, and we have error. Alright, and let's just provide an example. So, oh, I'm sorry, this shouldn't really be here. This is not an error, that's my mistake. So I mistaken this with the 500 error. So this is the schema for our successful response. So the schema is of type. So let's say schema is type array, and it's gonna have some items, and these items are going to be of type um, object. So let's say type um, and so let's just I'll write them down. So or let's just go ahead, if let me just see if I can just reference this here. All right, so now we should write them manually. Alright, so this is how our schema is structured. It's an array, and right, so it's an array and have these items. Right, so let's just go ahead and see if this is working. I'm gonna start the server. Hopefully we don't have any errors. I'm gonna refresh this, and as you can see, all of our endpoints are here, and let me check if everything is correct. Alright, so these are all our schemas, and you can see we actually can use a markdown. Alright, so the first one is this one. Alright, retrieves a list of all users from database, responses, and this is the example value. So the schema is actually working. As you can see, it's an array of objects, and so let's just go ahead and provide an example. So I'm gonna go here, and under items, or I'm not sure if this is the right place to put this thing, so let's just go ahead and do it. So password is going to be some gibberish, and the age is going to be 23. Alright, so make sure I put this correctly, and alright, so let's just go ahead and see if everything is fine. All right, so we got the example value, we got the schema, but I think this is just providing us with an object. This should be an array of objects. So let me just, I think I should put this here. Let's just go ahead and see if that fixes it. Alright, so as you can see now we have an array that's containing an object, so that's the exact way it should be written. And let's just go ahead with the rest of our responses. The next one is a 500, so I'm gonna kill this process again. And alright, so under here this should be aligned with this one. I'm gonna say 500. And now we can actually reference this error that we have written. So I'm gonna reference this one. Alright, so what I'm gonna do is $ref, and I'm gonna say components, and we're gonna say errors, and this is gonna be internal server errors. So if everything is correct, this should go on and render. So let's start the server again. Alright, as you can see we have the 500 error, and we also have the example that we provided way down there. And alright, so everything seems to be working. So let's just go ahead and try this out. I'm gonna say execute, and it's getting it's sending a request at this URL with a get request, and let's see the response. So response is at 200, and we got the only user that we have inside our database. So everything is working correctly. I'm gonna cancel this. Alright, so that's it for the this get method. So let's go ahead and do it for the post. Alright, so the next one is this post method, and we could just go ahead and copy everything, but I'm not going to do that. So let's just write them down again. So let's actually see what we need. Summary and description. All right. So this is gonna be under the users tag, just like this one. And for the post request, we're actually going to provide a request body. So let's say request body, and the request body should have a description. So let's say data for the new user to be created. All right, and after that we're gonna say that request body is required. So I'm gonna set required as true, and content should be. So I think we could just reference this user schema, because that's what we are going to send. So what I'm gonna say is just so let's say users. Right, so let me just say that this is application JSON. Alright, application JSON, and for this schema, going to provide this. So $ref components and schemas, going to pass in the user schema. All right, and let's just go ahead and provide an example too. So what we're going to do is, let me see if we have any examples in our code. Let's just go ahead and write it down. My name is James. Some random characters, and age is, I don't know, 23. Alright, so everything seems to be working fine. And let me just go ahead and kill the server and start it again. Alright, so we're gonna see if everything is working fine. Alright, so the post request is under the users tag, and there aren't any parameters that we need to pass in. The request body is required. Alright, so the example value and schema are there, so everything is working fine. But one thing that we should do is to tell Swagger that these are all required properties. So what I'm going to do is kill this terminal again and go back here, and under this I think we should say required is going to be haven't we actually, all right, so let's just say required is user ID, and I don't think we could say, right, so user ID is required, username, password, and age are all required, but I think we should actually give them this. Alright, so not sure, let's just try that and see what happens. Alright, okay, on line 58 we have an error. That's the line 58, so that's exactly what's going on. So let's just say user ID. Actually, let me just go and check the documentation for this one. So what I'm gonna do is describing request body overview. Alright, so I'm gonna search for required, or let me just see what's going on. Alright, so there should be somewhere that's so under the request body examples, request body is required content. Alright, so this is the way to do it. Alright, so let me just go ahead and this is the way to do it. Alright, so alright, hopefully everything is working fine. So now inside our schema you can see there's a red asterisk besides this property, so that's working correctly. So let's just go ahead and work on the responses for this endpoint. I'll kill the server again, and alright, so after request body you should go here, say responses. Alright, so the possible responses for this create method are 201 and conflict and bad request, plus if there's server error, which is internal server error. So all of our possible errors except the not found. So let's see. So we have the conflict and bad request and internal server error. Alright, so what I'm gonna do is firstly create the success response, so 201, and this should be description, and it's gonna be created. All right, that's all. We don't provide anything else. And so let's go ahead with our error responses. Let's say 400, and after that is the conflict, and after that is the internal server error. So I'm gonna reference them all. So let's say ref and components. Gonna use errors, and this should be. Let me just copy this so I don't get them wrong. So it should be bad request, and here again ref, and let me copy this line. All right, and this should be conflict, and here we say ref again, and I copy this again, and this should be internal server error. So all right, we got our errors out of the way. Let's just go ahead and test it out. No problems. All right, so this is our post request bodies. All right, responses. These are all the possible responses for our controller. So let's just try it out. I'm gonna say try out, and we're going to send user ID 3. Gonna call it Jax, and the password should be the same. It's 40 years old. Right, so we got the response, and it's a 201, and this is a request body. All right, so everything is working correctly. So all right, so we're done with the post request, and the next one is the getting one user from the database. So let's just go ahead and do that. All right, so after all of this code and here, so what I'm gonna do is actually we could copy this from this section. So let me just say description and contents, then we modify later on. All right, okay, going to all right, so this actually sorry, I don't know what went wrong here, so let's just go ahead and fix this again, and we are going to copy from here. So let's say description, and all right, this should be okay, and here. All right, so everything seems to be fine. This is a get request, and we've copied the response. So let me just, that was a mistake on my part. All right, so let's just go ahead and do it ourselves. Operation ID is get one, and you're gonna be summary, which is gets a user from database. Description is gonna be gets a single user from, gets a single user from DB as JSON object. All right, so let's see what else we need. Operation ID, and we have provided them, so let's just give it the tags. All right, so And actually what we're going to need here is a parameter. So what I'm going to say is parameters. And this parameter, what I'm going to do is just reference it, this ID that we have created here. So when we're defining parameters, so in case we have multiple parameters, what we're going to do is use a dash and then going to say ref, and I'm going to reference that. So components, schemas, ID. All right, this should do it. Let's just go ahead and test it so far. No errors, hopefully. All right, so we should get. All right, so the parameters are working just fine. All right, so let's just go ahead and continue with this. No, close this one. All right, so the next thing is responses. So I'm gonna say responses, and inside this responses we could actually again copy what we have here. So I'm gonna say 200, and I'm gonna copy all of this, and right here I'm gonna put it right here. So I don't know what's wrong with this. All right, so responses is working just fine, but this should be so it's okay. Content application JSON schema is going to be type of object, and we're going to remove this, and actually we're going to remove all of this. So, and I'm gonna get all of these lines and move them one step behind. All right, so this should be okay. So we're basically giving this actually what we could do is just remove all of this part, and what I'm gonna do is reference the user schema that we created. That's actually more logical. So let's say user, because remember the schema of our user is actually what we're getting as a response here. So when we get a single user, all right, so and this is the example data. Let's just go ahead and check this out. So I'm gonna start it. Everything seems to be fine. Right, so inside here you can see, all right, this is working just fine. And all right, so let's just go ahead and continue with our responses. The rest of our responses should be our responses in get one. So we have a 404 or 200 or a 500. So let's just go ahead and do that. So under here I'm going to say 404 and 500 as our error responses. So let's just reference them. I'm going to do it really quickly so we get on with the rest of the video. So components, errors, and this is going to be not found, and after that this should be alright. So let me just make sure I got all of these correct. Alright, everything seems to be fine. Alright, let's just go ahead and start the server again. So we had all our responses 200, 404, and 500. So are all of the possible responses for this endpoint. So let's just try it out. I'm gonna say the ID should be 2. I'm going to execute. So it gave us this user mic with user ID 2, so it's working correctly, and we could move on to rest of our application. I'm gonna kill this process and clear the terminal. And all right, the next one is put request. So for the put request, what we're going to need is both parameter and the request body. So let's just get started with it. So put is going to be and I'm gonna put this inside and the summary is going to be alright, so tags. Alright, so firstly let's just get started with the parameter. And the parameters, we could just use this one. Alright, and after that we could get started the request body. And the request body, so let me see if we could actually use that. I think we have it somewhere, so let me just copy this, or not copy it all, and all the way down here I'm gonna say, right, make sure everything is correct. So request body, this should be, so let's update the description. It's gonna be new data to new data for user to be updated. Right, and it is required, and contains application JSON, and everything seems to work correctly. And let's just go ahead and check it out. Say npm start, no errors. Alright, so this is our put, so parameter seems to be working fine, and request body. Alright, so this is all good. Let's just continue. And the next thing is we're going to, let me make sure I get this correctly. The next thing is responses. So responses, and the possible responses inside the update controller are 404 and again a 404, so at 201 and the 500. So we have three possible responses. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna say 200, let's see, 201, yeah, that's 201. So 201, 404, and 500. So the 404 is really straightforward. All we're going to do is say description. It's going to be created. And after that, I'm going to reference the rest of them. So not found, and I'm going to copy this from here. Alright, and this should be internal server error. Internal server error, so everything should be working fine. Alright, so no errors. And as you can see, we have 201, 404, and 500 as our different responses to this put method. So what I'm going to do is actually test it out. So try out, and I'm going to update user 2. So let's firstly just get the user 2, and user 2 is Mike. So what we're going to do is say user 2 should be from now on user 4, and name is going to be Ali, and the password should be the same, and he's, I don't know, 44. Let's just execute. Alright, so we have a 201, and this is the newly created user for us. So this is working perfectly fine, and let's just go ahead with our last endpoint. Alright, so I'm gonna kill the terminal again and close it. So this delete method is going to have operation ID. ID is just remove, and summary. So let's say right, so I hope that's a good description, and the tags should be users. Alright, so there are only parameters that we need to provide, and there's no request body. So let's just go ahead and say parameters, and I'm gonna say ref and components, schemas, and it's going to be ID. Right after that, all we need to do is just provide the responses. Alright, so different responses are going to be, so inside our controller, inside our remove controller, we have not found, 204, and the 500. So let's go and say 204, 404, which is not found, and 500. Alright, so let me just get them done real quickly. So this should be just description. Description is no content. Right, so no content, and I'm going to reference these. And this is not found, and this should be components errors, and this is internal server error. Alright, so everything seems to be fine. Hopefully, let's just start the server, and I'm gonna refresh, and our delete method, alright, seems to be working fine. No content, not found, internal server error. Alright, so they're working fine. So let's just go ahead and delete this, test this out. I'm gonna delete user, let's just get all of the users. So I'm gonna, alright, so let's just delete this user 3. I'm gonna go ahead and delete user 3. Alright, so we got 204, and it's, so everything is working fine. And actually, let me just check something. This no content didn't show up, so let me just say no content, I don't know. Alright, so let me just delete user 1 this time. Alright, so not found. Alright, so maybe we do not have a user with ID of 1. Alright, but the overall endpoint is working fine. So that's it for today's video, and I hope you enjoyed this video. So this was a really long video to make, but I hope you actually learned something from it, and from now on you could write your own API documentation, And I'm just gonna wrap things up right here, and I'll see you in the next videos.